Hello, my name's Kingsley Singleton, Deputy Editor of Digital Photo, and welcome to this Photoshop and Elements video lesson. So you followed the landscape shooting tips in this month's magazine, found a good view and a nice foreground subject, in this case a crooked and windswept tree to anchor the composition, then made sure it's on one of the thirds of the frame so your picture is nicely balanced. You've exposed the shot well so none of the detail is lost to deep shadows or burnt out highlights. But there still seems to be something missing, some vital spark that's going to elevate your landscape over others. In this lesson, we'll look at improving the good results you've already achieved in camera so that you can go from a picture like this to one like this. A really inspiring landscape photo. We'll first make sure that the landscape is straight and level, even if the horizon isn't visible, and that the composition is spot on. Then we'll add a little bit of extra contrast to the shot so it becomes really eye-catching and not at all dull and gloomy. And finally, we'll apply a warm-up effect just to balance the colours in the picture. These basic landscape adjustments can be applied to virtually any scenic shot. And the tools that I'm going to be using in this video are available in all versions of Photoshop and Elements. So make sure you take a good look at your landscape shots and see how they could be improved using these techniques. Okay, let's close down our finished version, and to follow along with me, just make sure that you've got valley.jpg loaded up from this month's CD. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is make sure that our landscape is on the level. Bit difficult in this shot because we've got this sloping hillside and our trees all kind of bent over, but if we zoom right in, we can see that this lake in the distance is really leaning over to one side. We can tell that just by some of the lines on the water, so when you're examining shots and you don't have a flat horizon to check whether they're level or not, try and find some water in the scene because that's always a dead giveaway. So what we want to do to start leveling up our picture is just hold down the Control key and press minus a few times just to zoom out and make sure we've got a little bit of grey space around the edge of our picture there. And then I'm going to press Control and A, or come up to Select and down to All, just to make sure that our marching ants are running all the way around the outside of the image. And then I'm going to come over to Edit and down to Free Transform. This will bring up a bounding box just where those marching ants were, and using it we can straighten up the picture and make sure it's on the level. So to do that, we're just going to hover the cursor just outside one of those corner handles there, and then we'll simply click, hold down the mouse button and drag to rotate the shot. Now in this case we're going to want to rotate it by about 4 degrees or so clockwise, and you can see that happening just up here in the options bar. But to get a really good idea of whether our landscape is now perfectly on the level, you can bring up what's known as the grid. Just come up to View, down to Show and pick Grid, or you can press Ctrl and the apostrophe on the keyboard. Give that a click and the grid will appear. In Elements software, it's in pretty much the same place, but you don't need to go into that Show menu, it'll just be under the View menu. Now, with our grid on screen, we can zoom in once more, and just taking a nice close look at that lake there, we can see that the shadow on the water there, our telltale giveaway sign, is pretty much lining up with those horizontal lines of the grid. So we can come back out to a full view, get rid of our grid again by either coming up to the View menu, down to Show and just clicking it once more, or of course you can just press Ctrl and the apostrophe key again. And then before we click the tick to finish our transformation, you'll notice that we've got these nasty white areas that have appeared around our picture. That's the white background showing through behind the photo pixels there. We want to get rid of that. And the easiest way to do it is just to hold down the Control key and the Shift key at the same time on the keyboard, and then we'll click on one of those corner handles and just drag it out till they disappear. There we go. Now we're okay to click the tick up there in the options bar, just to finalize that transformation. And I think I'm just going to click on the image and just drag that over to the right a little bit, just to make our tree sit perfectly on that third of the frame. Maybe also just nudge it up a touch. Just click on the image and drag it to reposition. And then when you're done with that, come up to Select and down to Deselect. Because even though you can't see those marching ants, they're still active just outside our viewing area. You'll find now that if I try and click and drag on the image, I just get a warning we can't do it anymore because we've deselected, and we can get on with the rest of our landscape technique. So the next thing that we're going to look at is the contrast in the image. We're going to make sure that it's got some real bite and some definite kind of highlights and shadows, the sort of things that are just going to kind of really make it leap off the page. To do this, we're going to be using the levels palette. So to get that up on screen, either press Ctrl and L on the keyboard, or come up to Image, down to Adjustments, and pick Levels. Now, when the levels palette appears on screen, you can see we get this histogram right in the middle, and that's showing us how the light and dark pixels are being distributed within the image. And looking at this histogram, I can also tell that there's not really enough true black or white in our landscape picture. The histogram here doesn't go to the very end of the chart. That's where I want it. I want it to stretch all the way, making sure that we've got black parts and white parts in the shot. All we need to do to fix this is just click on the black slider, move that one in so it reaches the end of the histogram there, and then do exactly the same for the white slider, just nudging that one in just a little. Clicking on and off the preview box down here at the foot of the palette, you can see that we've made a subtle but definite improvement to the contrast of the picture there. It's just looking a little bit more vibrant. So that's working out pretty well, and we can just press OK to exit the palette. Thing is though, although we've now got a full range of tones in the image, I'm not really that happy about how they're sort of distributed really. I'd like to darken down the top of the image here, make the sky a little bit darker so that it kind of really provides a real sort of top to the image, and also increase the contrast in the foreground just to bring out the texture of this grass here that's kind of leading our eye into our subject. I've also noticed that the top left corner of the sky here is a little bit lighter than the rest of the sky, so we'll first need to even that up, and we can do that quickly and easily by first making a selection of that area. So over to the toolbox, click on the polygonal lasso icon there and select the regular lasso tool, and then I'm just going to draw a pretty kind of loose selection out over this part of the sky, back around the top, down the other side, release the mouse button, and the marching ants appear. Now we want to feather the edge of this selection because we don't want a hard edge between our adjusted areas and those that are fenced off. So click on the Refine Edge button up here in the options bar, and within here we're going to use a feather radius of something around 200 or 250 pixels. That's going to give us a really broad feather and make sure that the changes that we make are gradually applied to that area. This is the kind of feathering that you'll be using most of the time when you're working on landscape images, because you don't want your adjustments to seem unnatural. You want them to work quite subtly and fit in nicely with the rest of the scene. So setting that feathering at about 200 pixels will do us perfectly fine here. We can click OK to exit the Refine Edge palette, and then we'll bring up the Levels palette again with Ctrl and L, and this time you'll see that because I fenced off a small part of the image, our histogram is only based on that area. It's showing us that we've got a lot of lighter tones in that part of the image, and to darken them down I'm just going to drag the black point slider over, and we'll just keep an eye on that corner, and we'll just want to kind of even that up with the rest of the sky. So something around about there is probably okay, just dragging that middle slider as well. We don't want to make it too dark, we don't want to make it overpowering, we just want to kind of even it up. Something that will help you when working on fenced off areas of your image is to get rid of those marching ants. And although it doesn't work in all versions of Photoshop, if you're in the full version you can press Ctrl and H on the keyboard. That'll hide the marching ants and make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. So the adjustments that we're making are still functional. There you can see that I'm making it much too dark, but if we set it to something about there, I think that should be okay. So we'll click OK to exit the Levels palette again, and then we must make sure to either press Ctrl and H to bring up our marching ants again. We don't want to forget them, and then come up to Select and down to Deselect. Because if we try and make adjustments to any other parts of the image while our marching ants are still hidden, we won't be able to because the fencing off of that part is still active. Make sure they're deselected, and then we can take a look at darkening down the rest of the sky. So again, using the regular lasso tool, we'll just draw a selection out over the whole of the top part of the sky there. Wait until those marching ants appear again, click the refine edge button, and once again 200 pixels will be fine for this image. Click OK, and then it's back to the levels palette with Control and L, and you can see that our histogram has changed again. This time there are a few more sort of midtones and fewer highlights in that histogram there. But what we're going to do is very similar to before. We're going to drag that black point slider over, something around meeting the end of the histogram there should be okay, and then also drag that middle slider, that gamma slider, over to the right as well. And we'll just press Control and H again, just so we can get a better look at how those alterations are affecting the sky. That's looking pretty good to me. And if you want an even better preview of how those tones in the sky are being affected, just make sure you hold down the Alt key on the keyboard while you click and drag those black and white point sliders, and you'll see the clipping warnings begin to appear. And the more I drag that over, the closer we're getting to black. We don't want that, that's much too harsh. You can see those black pixels creeping in. We'll set it down here at about 55 or so, just before those first blue clipping warnings appear. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. We can hit OK to exit the palette again, and now we can turn our attention to the foreground. Pretty much the same deal as before. This time we're going to draw our selection, once again using the regular lasso tool, down just following the curve of the hillside, back along the bottom, so we take in all that foreground grass, those nice textured stems, back up to refine edge. This time we're going to use the full measure of feathering, 250 pixels, click OK, and then it's back to the levels palette, Control and L, and once again we'll drag that black point slider over using the Alt key to give us a little preview there. Just going to stop it when those first black pixels start appearing. That's looking pretty good. And then we'll also just click and drag the white point slider this time in towards the left. Something around about there will be fine, and you can see that we're sort of adding a really nice rich contrast to that area of the picture. Just clicking the preview box on and off once again shows you that we've really gone from something that was quite drab and grey to a much more interesting textured foreground. And to make it work even better with the rest of the picture, I'm also just going to quickly and easily add a warming up effect to the foreground, once again using the levels palette, so there's no need to hit OK to exit it this time. Just going to click next to where it says RGB up here at the top of the palette and choose red from the list. So this time we're only making changes to the red color channel. And now I'm going to click and drag that middle slider to the left, just introducing a lot more red into the picture. Around 2.00 there should be okay. And as I've done that, you can see that it's created a much more interesting range of colours in the picture. We've now got the blue in the sky, the green in the tree and in the distance there, and then we come down to this lovely warm grassy foreground. Just clicking on and off the preview there again, you can see that the original shot, it's probably too green really. There's only the green and the blue of the sky, not enough to really drag you in. But with that warm-up effect, we make it much more interesting, much more intriguing for the viewer. And to just fine-tune that effect, I'll this time change the color channel to green, and this time we'll click and drag that middle slider just a little bit over to the right, down to about 0.9 there. That's just forcing a little bit more magenta into the foreground, just adding to that warm-up effect. And finally we'll pick the blue channel, and again we'll move that over to the right to about 0.9, and that's just adding a bit more yellow to the scene, taking the blue out of the foreground, putting in more yellow, which once again just gives us that lovely warm look to the grass. Once again, just hit OK to exit the palette, and then Control and D on the keyboard to get rid of the selection. Right, so the last thing that I'm going to do is just try and create a little bit more separation between the tree and the background, just making it stand out a little bit more as the central sort of subject of the picture. I'm going to do that using the dodge tool, which I'm going to use just to sort of subtly lighten the background behind the tree and hopefully leave the tree itself alone. So over to the toolbox and just pick out the dodge tool. In this case it's hiding under the burn tool, so just click on that and hold your mouse button down, select it from the list, and then up in the options bar here we'll just make sure that the brush size is down at around 200 pixels, that it's got a nice soft edge, so we'll set that hardness to 0% there, and then where it says range, just click next to that and change it to midtones. The exposure, as long as you set it low, around sort of 3 or 4%, you'll be okay. Anything higher than that and the effect can be applied to the image too fast and you can make it look a bit gaudy. Just going back to the softness of the brush for a moment before we start lightening that background. If you're using elements, you won't find a hardness slider in there, so just to kind of create that soft edge to the brush, just hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and tap the left square bracket key a few times. You'll see it soften up in the brush preview, and when it's looking nice and fuzzy, all you need to do is just start clicking and running it over that part of the background. Now that's the first sweep that I've made, and if I just press Ctrl and Z a couple of times, you can see the difference that we've made. That's before and that's after, and you can see that the tree is certainly standing out from those receding hills a lot better. We'll just give it a few more passes. That's looking kind of okay to me, I think. And we can see that if we go back to our original undodged state, they do sort of crash into each other a little bit, but after the dodging, the tree stands out in a much more pleasing way. We might have actually lightened the tree up a little bit too much though, so what we're going to do is just select the burn tool, make sure that range is set to shadows, just bring that brush size down once again to about 200 pixels, and then run it over the same area, just that part of the tree there, just to kind of bring back some of the darkness that we might have lost. That's not affecting the midtones behind the tree, it's just bringing back those shadows. And we'll just run it over some of the leaves as well, I think, just to kind of add a little bit of extra contrast there. Okay, so once again, here's our pre-dodging and burning state, and then after the work's been done, it really stands out of the background. The final thing that we're going to do is just add a little bit more sharpness to the image using the Unsharp Mask filter. So it's up to the filter menu, down to sharpen, and pick Unsharp Mask. And if you're using a more modern version of Elements, you'll find this option under the Enhance menu. Give it a click, and just to sharpen up those details a little bit, just making sure that we've got a nice kind of crisp edge to the picture. I'm going to set the amount at 100%, use a radius of 1 pixel, and then set that threshold to 2 levels. And that's just going to add a little bit of extra bite to the picture, so we've got nice crisp details right from the background through to the foreground. Click OK to exit the palette, and that's our striking landscape image completed. It hasn't taken long to improve on the original, and I'm sure you'll agree that the adjustments we've made have been worthwhile. We've got this nice, rich, textured, warm foreground with all the grass blowing in, taking the eye in to the subject here, the twisted tree, and to the cool greens and blues of the lake beyond, and finally that lovely cloudy sky which we've darkened towards the top, just making sure that our eye stays there in the middle of the picture. As you've seen, it was all quick and easy to do, so make sure you give it a try on your own landscape images. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.